Hi, everybody. Marc Lawrence with PlaybookSports.com, inviting you to join us for our new YouTube channel featuring our Playbook Sports Vegas Experts Picks. Go online at YouTube.com, click the subscribe button, and watch all the videos compliments of the Playbook Experts. And now let's get on with the show today.
All right, Mark. So week 4 already in college football, week 3 in the NFL, and of course you're already up to things. Of course, you just segued us into the show talking about your new channel, and of course Victor and you having a fun time gearing up for the week in the NFL and college football. So that kind of you know gives me an opportunity to maybe piggyback off of some of your picks each week and go, all right, I kind of like that too. There are a couple of games that I noticed that you liked that I liked, so that's always beneficial. I like the fact that it makes me feel better when I know that you like a game that I already had penciled in as well.
That's called advanced insight, Greg. Okay. And
Yeah.
you're privy to it, and that's really,
Yes.
really good news. But we're also really excited at Playbook about doing the videos with you in our Playbook Experts YouTube channel. We really love doing the videos because it helps, number one, get us better prepared for the weekend. We've done a lot of work with the newsletter, as you know, but doing the videos really hones us in, and I'm really looking forward to this segment as well.
I want to remind everybody that if you have any questions or comments, just let us know in the, well, actually, it's basically in the uh, comments section. Actually, it's in the description section on the channel. So check it out. Questions, comments, maybe you have a game that you want us to analyze or pick for this week or for next week. Let us know. We'll, because we don't go over every single game, even though a little bit later on in the program, I'll have my report, which is going to I can do my best to summarize all the other games that we don't get a chance to talk about on the show. Updated injury reports, trends, odds, whether or not I have a pick on it. So you can check that out. That's going to be in between our college football and NFL picks. It'll be specifically for college football, though. NFL, I'm going to do as best of job on this show to talk about everything that I can to get it in each week. And of course, remember to subscribe to this channel. That is always important. And if you like what you see, please share the video to your friends. That's always important. Let's get started, Mark, with talking about what happened last week. The biggest news, maybe, in college football. I know anything on the West Coast isn't treated as such, but having Herm Edwards fired, it's. I don't know what's college football, and I don't know, maybe the NFL is to blame as well, but I just don't get when you have these kind of situations where the coach's job is on the line and you allow him to coach and implement schemes for months, and then you go into the regular season and you wait 2 or 3 weeks and then you decide to fire the guy. I mean, if you were that unsure, you should have just fired him to begin with. And I think the same thing with Scott Frost. If you were that unsure about Scott Frost, you just fired him, started over. You would have had an opportunity to have a head coach, last season, at the end of the season. So I don't understand these 3 games and out kind of deals. But Arizona State, I know it's not necessarily that they lost to Eastern Michigan, but that was like the icing on the cake with all the scandal going on at Arizona State.
Well, we don't know because we're not in the locker room, so we don't know what the rapport was between the players and Herm Edwards. There was also the scandal, as you mentioned, which doesn't sit well, obviously, with the athletic department. So they were probably searching for reasons to let Herm go. And much like a coach that's been with the team a little bit too long, his voice to the players, they end up not even listening to because they've heard it before. They're hearing the same thing over and over. It becomes mundane after a while. That could well have been the case with Edwards, who is, he's a military disciplinarian, is what he is. And his college kids are a little bit more freewheeling. So I don't think they really dug his style per se, and it ended up catching up with him in the end.
Yeah, especially in Arizona. I mean, that's
Yes,
a party
exactly.
school.
Right.
So, well, we'll see who gets hired there. That's a nice look. Just like we're starting to see a little bit at Arizona, I think Arizona State is a tremendous opportunity. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with the Pac-12. Everybody's leaving, and you know what? Based on that crappy network deal that they have, I understand why. Because I can't believe it. I was going over the games this week, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me that they're putting the USC Oregon State game on the Pac-12 network. got to be kidding me. It's like not only a big game for the conference, it's actually one of the biggest games of the week. If you're a college football fan, it's a huge game. And nobody's going to watch it. So, but anyway, that is a great opportunity for a football coach that is interested. Jed Fish, as we have noted, is doing a nice job at Arizona. And I think they should and probably will hire someone, if the AD's smart enough, hire somebody with a good resume or an up and coming resume.
If not a big resume, at least a big, powerful name that people will say, wow, he's going to coach that football program. Because Arizona State is kind of like a not quite a powerful Power Five football program, but could be.
Could be, yes.
Yes, especially with the merger with the Big Ten. So might that mean Urban Meyer comes back to the Big Ten by way of Arizona State? Who knows?
Yeah. I don't even know what's left in the Pac-12 of this Big Ten. I don't even. It's just so confusing. It's still got a couple of years to go. But yeah, the fact is it's a great opportunity, and we'll see who's going to take over next season. And that's not a game that we're going to talk about. But I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't touch that game against Utah at all because I have no idea what to expect out of Arizona State in that game. Look what happened with Nebraska. You thought that maybe, and it looked like it. They were all fired up, gung ho. Hey, Frost is gone, and we're all excited, and then they get destroyed.
Well, they come out and scored first, and then they were all pumped up. They scored everything. Everybody's geeked up in the stands, and then reality set in. That's the one thing about handicapping. When you're handicapping sports, it's very, very difficult in determining what's going to happen to a team in their psyche after a coach has been let go or fired.
Yeah, you're better off.
You just don't know.
You're better off either staying away, or if you want to throw a couple of bucks on the money line, just because maybe they're all going to be fired up and they're going to steal a game or something. Fine, I'm okay with that, but I couldn't unless I loved it, like the favorite, like Utah in this spot, which I can't really, say that I do. That I would just stay away. I don't know what you're going to get.
There was so much handicap into Nebraska against Oklahoma last week. It was very, very difficult not to bet that game or not to touch that game. 13 straight games with single-digit losses.
Yes.
Everything was all there pointed in Nebraska in the football game, and it just flat out didn't work out. So yep. I think it all comes down to if a situation like that happens, just avoid the football game. Or like you say, if you're tempted, if the money line's big enough, maybe throw a shekel or two on the money line.
Yeah, and not that it's a coaching thing, but with Oklahoma coming out of the Nebraska game, I was, obviously you had to be impressed, and now you're thinking about, okay, well, just how good is Oklahoma, because there's even though Riley left, we know that there's a ton of players there, quality football players that he didn't bring with him, and we know Venables is a top defensive coach, and already the defense is looking solid already. It's got a quarterback, so maybe Oklahoma could be a sleeper that we weren't really thinking about when the season began.
Well, he also inherited a cupboard that was pretty deep. I mean, I know Lincoln Riley took some players with him to Southern Cal, but the other players that dot that roster were all 3- and 4-star recruits. Yeah. So, the program is healthy. In fact, they were picked to win the Big 12 conference this year before the season started.
Yeah, what else is new?
Yeah, what else is new? Everybody else was all geeked up on Texas, but the fact is Oklahoma was the preseason choice.
And that would be an interesting game with K-State because K-State, as they beaten them like 3 out of 6 years or something like that. But Adrian Martinez, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's a scheme thing or he doesn't look good at all right now. I thought that would be the guy that was going to put him over the top. But, boy, Skylar Thompson is 10 times better than what we've seen so far from Adrian Martinez. So, but you never know. Sometimes, it'll just be 1 week and then it clicks. And then all of a sudden they can kind of take off. But that offense is just killing them.
Well, Skylar Thompson was good enough to make the Miami Dolphin roster this year as a third-string quarterback, which is really rather rare for a 7th pick in the draft to make a roster, and not as a practice squad player, but make the roster. So, he's talented. Obviously, Skylar Thompson is. Adrian Martinez has had his problems in the past. Looks good. Everything looked good on paper, and he blows up. So maybe we're seeing that again at Kansas State. But I just feel that we're going to see a different Kansas State football team this week.
Now, as far as and there's always these games. We had the App State Hail Mary, and there was some other. The Purdue Syracuse game was crazy, but there were, and we always get those line games that can kill you or save you. And the game that I wanted to point out, which was actually one that saved me because it was one of my 4-star picks, was California. I was getting 11, and I had the decision. I think we talked about it last week. Do I take California in the money line, or do I put him in a 4-star? And I said, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put him in the 4-star. So that saved me. But I had the 11, and so here they are, and it's late in the game. They're about on midfield, and they need to try to score to win the game. And so you're in this spot a lot, and what you say when you're on Cal side, don't get sacked, fumble the football, and scoop and score. Don't have a pick six. That's it. As long as you don't do that, I should be fine. I got the game covered. And what does he do? He apparently, I think it was a fumble. It was a fumble or an interception. I forget what it was, but it was he gets hit, I think, and it was a wobbly pass, and boom, there's turnover, and Notre Dame is flying down the field, and I just can't believe what I'm seeing. And they're going to score a touchdown, and I'm going to lose the wager. So, but wait a second, we got to look at the replay, and on the replay, Notre Dame did not have. I think again, I think it was a possession thing. Oh no, now I remember it was the quarterback's knee was down. So his knee was down, and there was no
turnover.
Yeah, so it came that close, and again, it's happened to all of us where we've been on that side where you think you got the game won, and something silly like that happens, and you get backdoored, and it's just a nightmare. Very rarely do you get the reprieve. So they got the reprieve, and they almost were able. They went down, and they had their own little Hail Mary, and the guy from California just couldn't hold on to the football in the end zone. They actually almost stole that football game, but that was a real close call.
Close enough to make it really, really sweaty, if you will, for Notre Dame's head coach here, who's really struggling to start the football season here. He's going to need a big effort this weekend, I think, to keep the heat off of him. But kudos on the call to California. Going into the game, statistically, we do a midweek alert newsletter. That's our statistical newsletter, and the first issue just did come out this week. And what we noted inside that midweek alert is the fact that Notre Dame had not won the yards in any football game they played, and California had won the yards in every game they played. So that was like a nice statistical merge, if you will, in the football game. So that was a nice call. California, a double-digit dog.
Yeah, and as you're saying, you might as well, as we talk about this week's game, start with Notre Dame and North Carolina. And look, I've seen enough of Notre Dame at this point, and I've seen what North Carolina's been doing, and Notre Dame has beaten them the last couple of years. And so we know where the momentum, we know where the revenge angle's coming from. Like, we don't want to lose 3 years in a row, especially if, you're into this whole history of college football. Hey, this is our last opportunity maybe to beat this Notre Dame team. We just lost to them 2 straight years. But I mean, this quarterback for North Carolina, I mean, Howell left, but Howell didn't have. I mean, he had some really good weapons a couple of years ago. Then he loses most of the weapons, so he didn't have the statistical year last year that he would have liked. This year, those young guys are getting a little bit older. Plus, Josh Downs is there, who, by the way, hasn't even played yet this season. I think he played the first game for a little bit, but he's been injured. So without Downs, this quarterback has done a fantastic job. They've led every game. Matter of fact, I think I wrote down where if you take a look at it, now this is good and bad, but North Carolina has had leads in every game. They've led 35-24 in the fourth quarter against Florida A&M. Actually, no, I don't even want to talk about that game because it's Florida A&M. But here's the last 2 games. Appalachian State. They led 41-21 in the fourth quarter, and we know what happened in that game, 63-61. They led 21-3 in the second quarter against Georgia State and needed a touchdown late when the score was tied 28-28. So the last 2 weeks, when the game has been, the competition's been up, they've taken leads against good football teams. They've squandered those leads, but then they've come back to win the football game. But Drake May, I think he's only a redshirt freshman, is clearly the better quarterback than anything Notre Dame is going to be throwing out there now. I know Notre Dame's got a better defense. I get that. I just don't see Notre Dame at this point. Mac Brown can run circles right now around Marcus Freeman as far as an X's and O's coach. So I got to go with North Carolina. That's definitely one of my better plays this week.
Well, I guess it all comes down to, which do you prefer? Notre Dame's 290-yard offense or North Carolina's 460-yard defense? You don't like either one, okay?
No.
You don't. But I think this is a much bigger game for North Carolina here. Both of those losses came with Mac Brown. That's meaningful revenge for him, at least, as far as the Tar Heels are concerned. And I'm going to go back to what we just opened up the show with, talking about the pressure being squarely on Freeman in a game like this. This game is switched, if you will. Notre Dame opened the favorite. Now they're the underdog in the contest because of the injuries and the Tyler Buchner situation to Notre Dame. But I'm with you. I think the Tar Heels, this is a much bigger game for the Tar Heels. I think they get the win, and I think all of a sudden the flames start to heat up for Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, I just don't think it's going to change anytime soon. This is not Brian Kelly's Notre Dame, where they can get off to a couple of bad games, freakish this, whatever. Okay, they'll be okay. They'll run off 7-8 wins. It's not going to happen. They're down to their backup quarterback. It's just not a pretty thing right now for Notre Dame. The offensive line has kind of let them down. They thought they were going to be better than they were. That's not good. They're not. I don't think they're going to be as bad as they are right now. But when they play the teams that are playing well right now, like North Carolina, I think it's going to be kind of tough for them. I tell you what, since we're talking North Carolina, let's stay on Tobacco Road and talk a little bit of a basketball rivalry turned football, Duke and Kansas. So how do you? I mean, this is just awesome. I think this is great, and we've talked up Kansas for the last few weeks, and they went ahead again and upset Houston. So I didn't take him as an upset. I actually took him as a 5-star. So that was a huge, and they go out and win the game, and they were clearly the better team. So that was awesome. And then you take a look at Duke, and I think the line was like 9, and now it's down getting close to 7. So it's starting to shrink up. But I was happy about that because a couple things. First of all, I like both teams. I had Duke upset Northwestern a few weeks ago.
You have to like both teams, yes.
Duke's defense is they got a quarterback that can run and make plays, and they've got a defense that is very opportunistic, and they've got a new head coach that comes from the defensive side of the ball. So their defense is for real, but Kansas is they've got a little bit more explosion on offense. We've talked up, Leipold now, probably more than anybody. So that's how confident we are with both teams. But I just think, look, Duke kicked their butt last year. So I can see this being a little bit payback for Kansas. So I'm taking Kansas in this game. But again, even if Kansas wins and covers, I still believe in Duke.
Well, I think Duke's going to be a nice football team this year, and I'd be stunned if they don't make a bowl game this year. Both of teams are undefeated to start the season here. And as you mentioned, this has got a real nice basketball persona all about it, but being played on a football field instead.
Yes.
It's hard to jump off the Kansas merry-go-round when we were on it from the start, and it's really worrying right now. But my biggest concern is what we called out in the Playbook newsletter in our incredible stat this week, and it's the fact that Kansas has really struggled against undefeated football teams. They're 1-23 in their last 24 games against undefeated football teams. Now, I know a lot of that was the Kansas of old and not the Kansas with Lance Leipold.
No.
But you're still got a healthy number here. You're talking something a little bit more than a touchdown here. And I think just for the number, and I mean just for the number alone, I would take the points in the football game. But I still do see Kansas winning the game. I know they've got Iowa State up next, a big look-ahead football game. But I can see Kansas edging out Duke in this football contest.
Okay, now let's talk about one of the biggest games, and I'm kind of This game has usually been in the 12 o'clock, 3:30 Arkansas, Texas A&M, and it's like been on Fox, and I guess that was a nice little spot for them. But they're now going prime time, and not only are they going prime time, but the SEC Network has said we're taking this game. I'm a little bit surprised that Fox wasn't able, but there's other games like Oklahoma and Kansas State. So okay, but kudos for SEC Network to steal this game from everybody else. because they know what this is becoming. Texas A&M owned Arkansas for a while. Arkansas started to play better. They were big dogs for a couple of years, but still these close games. And then last year, they finally broke through. I remember last year taking Arkansas and KJ Jefferson. And so that's why I'm taking him again. I am a KJ Jefferson believer. I think he is an underrated. He's not going to win it, but I think he should be an underrated Heisman candidate. He's that type of college quarterback. He's a difference maker. He can run, but most of all, he can throw. He can do both, and he can win. For Texas A&M, they did go to Max Johnson, by the way, which was my worst nightmare. We talked about that last week. They start with him. He doesn't have a fantastic game, but he doesn't throw the game away. He doesn't do anything stupid. And that was good enough for Texas A&M. But that's not going to be good enough for Arkansas. They are going to have to put points on the board to beat Arkansas. That's why I'm taking the Hogs. I think Arkansas is just right now the better football team. And I'm going with Arkansas in the neutral site game at Dallas on Saturday night.
I'm with you with the Hogs in this football game as well. Big Sam Pittman fan. I think he's doing everything right for the Razorbacks. They're feeling it. They're taking the field with a lot of confidence. They're not being intimidated by anybody they're playing. They've out-yarded every opponent they played this year. They're winning the stats over 100 yards a game. I think they go in here with much more momentum in this football contest than does Jimbo Fisher in the football game here. And I think they take advantage of it. Better wins out. We better take the points with Arkansas.
Arkansas just 1-3 straight up in the last 4, but that was last year, and they've covered 4 straight. Remember, I said that they've been playing better against A&M lately, so they've got 4 straight covers. By the way, last year's win snapped a 9-game losing streak in the series by Arkansas. They lead the nation with 17 sacks. And that's important because they've had some injuries in the secondary, including Jalen Catalon, one of the better defensive backs in the nation, who was injured. And that was a couple weeks ago, and they give up a ton of passing yards. But I don't know if Texas A&M is going to have. Again, I like Max Johnson. I think he gives them a better chance. He probably still should throw for over 300 yards against Arkansas's defense. But I look at this as more as like a very exciting. I got a bear in my yard. Very exciting.
It's a Cal Bear is who it is.
The Cal Bears are here to exact revenge. Anyway, so my train of thought, but Arkansas I just think is going to win. I don't know what the total is because I don't worry about the totals too much, but I would think it's going to be a high-scoring game, and I think it's going to be a very exciting game.
I think it's going to be a very exciting football game as well. And I think what this also does, Greg, is a little bit of what we've talked about before in the past is Max Johnson came in and the team rallied around him. We see that a lot where a second-string quarterback comes in, the team does their thing around the fallen starter. But the next game thereafter, they tend to struggle. There's suddenly game film on that quarterback with this team. And I think Sam Pittman's the ideal coach to take advantage of something like that. And I would not be surprised at all if Arkansas does not win this game.
All right. Next up, let's talk about some of these other big games. This one's going to be early. This is going to be at around noontime. And I know that we already disagree on this one because I was able to listen to you guys talk about this game yesterday. And that is Clemson and Wake Forest, even though I completely understand why you would be siding with Clemson in this one because they've won 13 straight against Wake Forest by a 527 to 167 margin. That's 40-12. That's the margin of victory over the last 13 games. But in those 13, Wake Forest has covered 6 of the 13. So there's that. Keeping in mind that those spreads are like 30. So this is a different Wake team. And I said this last year when Clemson went to Pittsburgh. I said, if Pittsburgh, and they had the same thing, they couldn't beat Clemson. They just, no matter what they tried, they're not in the same hemisphere as Clemson. If they can't beat Clemson with Kenny Pickett this year, the way Clemson's not Clemson from before last year, I don't know when they're going to beat them. And that's how I'm feeling about Wake Forest. This is Sam Hartman is going to go to the pros next year. This is going to be their best last chance in a long time, in my mind, to beat Clemson. And I know Victor was talking about he did a good job, by the way, pronouncing ukulele's name, the quarterback of Clemson. I'm not even going to try, but
Ukulele's good.
yeah. So, and he was pointing, and he was talking about points scored from Clemson. But overall, I don't see a whole lot of changes in his game. I don't think he's upped his game much. He's got a very exciting young running back in Will Shipley. He's the primary weapon on the team at running back. I still, and no, I'm not saying Wake's a great defense, but now that he's going to be matched up with Sam Hartman, plus there's a couple of issues on defense. You've got one of their key defensive linemen's injured and hasn't played for a few weeks, Xavier Thomas. Breezy, the defensive lineman, is dealing with his sister's death this past week. He had to go to a funeral. Now that maybe that works to his advantage. He can take his mind off of it, and maybe they rally for the kid. But I just think that, like I said, this is Wake's last chance in a long time to beat Clemson, and that's why I'm going to go ahead and say that this is the one that puts Clawson and this program over the top.
Your analogy fits perfectly in an aftermath role in describing why Wake Forest beat Clemson. They're going to be all geeked up for the game. It was their last chance. Sam Hartman, the offense for Clemson, is not what it's been before in the past. All those good check marks, those boxes were checked. What I see here in this football contest is a Dabo Swinney football team that had to sit and watch Wake Forest play Pittsburgh in the ACC championship game last year. Well, he was on the sidelines and not participating in the game. Dabo Swinney has also been outstanding in conference games when he comes off a big win of 20 or more points. He's 19-5 to the spread when he's on the road in these football contests. I'm gonna ride the Dabo Swinney freight train here. I think this football team, they didn't get their due last year. Everybody was down on them. All they did was win 10 games, and that was a year for Clemson.
Yeah.
And they're going to win 10 games or better again this football season
Sure.
here. But I think he's got this game circled, and he wants this game probably as much or more than any other game on the card. So whether or not Dabo's able to extract that remains to be seen. You brought out a good point, but I'm going to ride the Dabo Swinney train here.
Well, keep this in mind, because this is important, of course. Not that you don't know, but for all the viewers out there. But next up, North Carolina State. So this is the season for Clemson in 2 weeks. If they take care of business like they normally have done for many years prior to last year, then they're going to go to the ACC championship game. If they split, well, then we're going to have an interesting, conundrum. Does Florida State get into the picture? That kind of thing. Because, by the way, I believe – no, that's right. It's NC State. I think it's Boston College, and then it's Florida State. So, but that's still Wake Forest, NC State, and then a couple weeks later, Florida State. So, and that's all good, because we've been waiting for these teams to try and catch up to Clemson for many years, and they've obviously caught up a little bit. The question is how much have they caught up? If Clemson beats Wake Forest and North Carolina State the next couple of weeks and they win this division again, back to the drawing board. If some other team like Florida State or NC State wins the division, now we've got something to talk about, next year. So,
well, this will obviously be a big springboard game for either team. The team that wins this football game is going to go on and have a real nice season. The team that doesn't is going to take a step back and second guess and question themselves. So we'll be able to gauge from this football game here about what happens to these two teams moving forward.
All right, now let's talk about a big one down south between Florida and Tennessee. And you see I take Wake Forest with the points is one thing, and what I'm going to get at is I've said this all along. I like taking teams that have dominated a series and they go into a line the next game and they're the dog. So Wake and Clemson are different because Clemson's dominated, but Clemson's the favorite, even though the line's smaller. Florida and Tennessee, we both know how much we prefer when the season began, Tennessee over Florida. Both thought Florida would be better with Napier, and so far they have. I'm willing to think that what happened last week against South Florida was a sandwich game. They had the big games to start the season. They had the big game against Tennessee coming up, and here was a big home game against a team they should have clobbered, and they almost lost the game. So I'm willing to forgive them a little bit. But Richardson, as I've been saying all season, the guy can't throw the football. He's one-dimensional. He's a runner. That's it. He can't throw the football. But again, I'm just having a hard time at least not taking Florida. It's not going to be a top pick, but it's going to be a pick nonetheless because like I said, I pretty much 90 to 95% of the time will always take the team in this spot. Florida has dominated this series for the last 5 years, and they're the 10-point dog. So I'm taking Florida.
Do you know what Anthony Richardson's nickname was coming into this football season? AR-15.
That better been for his legs.
Well, because he's got a cannon for an arm. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Yeah, the cannon arm. Yeah.
Exactly.
We've
right.
heard that before.
Right, but we don't see AR-15 anymore because of all the ugliness that's happened, obviously, with rifles and guns and things like that. So, but
that's probably good for him.
Yes, it's real good for him. But let's get back to the game itself at hand here, and I think you hit it right on the head when you opened up your dissertation about this football game here. Certain teams, when they dominate other teams and they come up big underdogs in football games, have to be made a case for. And until they prove otherwise, that they're no longer in domination of that team. That's the case for the Florida Gators against Tennessee. Tennessee is now the upstart team in the SEC this year. Upstart in a slow build, but a lot was expected, and they're delivering this year, and kudos to them. They're having a real nice football season. Florida right now, new head coach coming in. They got a nice win earlier on in the football season here. I like their chances here with these numbers. They're ridiculous numbers. They're not only big numbers, they're ridiculous. 16-1 to the spread, the last 17 in the series. Are you kidding me?
I didn't even go back that far. I didn't realize it was that bad.
Yeah, it's that bad. Obviously, with numbers like that, inside that, you can go on and on and on and just keep shooting holes and shooting holes and shooting holes. But this is still a Florida football team that is going to be in a pretty good bowl game this year.
Yeah.
And you're talking double digits here to a Tennessee football team that is expected to be good or better than they were last year. You got to prove to me otherwise. Call me from Missouri. You got to prove it to me here in a game like this. I have to play Florida plus the points.
By the way, and I don't know if, actually, it's going to be in one of our games, another one of our games that we're going to talk about in a minute. But I wanted to ask you about the whole college football, because I know we've talked about it years past. When you get to that, Florida now is in their first road game. But we could have talked about it last week. When you come to that third straight or fourth straight home game to start a season, isn't that like a little bit of a worry potential that you have to always monitor? That sometimes, especially, last week you could have seen that with the sandwich game as well. That you have the sandwich game plus the third straight home game. So. And it's still important because, like I said, there are still teams that are in that this week. So is that something that we always have to look at? Home teams in a third or fourth straight home game to start the season may be in trouble.
Well, it's called too much home cooking is what it's really called, because you get content sitting at home, sleeping in your own bed. Your routine's not changing. You get a little bit satisfied because there's largely wins involved when you're at home, and especially when you're knocking off bad football teams. This is not a bad football team, so there's not likely to be that letdown per se to Tennessee. We talked a little bit about it yesterday in our podcast about Ohio State opening up the season with 5 straight home games in a row. I think that's ridiculous that they would be allowed or would even schedule that. But nonetheless, they're doing it. They're taking advantage of that. Tennessee camped at home here as well. I don't think it's going to be an edge either way in the contest here. Not only is it Florida dominating Tennessee, you can go back and open up the history books, and you can look at Florida as an underdog in the SEC in other games. They're a damn good underdog in conference play. Florida is, and always has been, regardless of who the coach has been. So I'm not going to shy away from Tennessee here, and I know some people might like the fact that they're sitting at home with this home cooking here. I don't think it's a factor in the game. I just love the history in the game and the fact that Florida is a good football team.
Yeah, I look at and again, I think Tennessee is going to have a fantastic season. The Georgia game is going to be they're going to be the one team that's going to have a chance that we're going to be okay. Let's glue into this first half, Can they hang with them for a half to make it interesting in the second half? That's going to be the team that we think might be able to do that. But in order to do that, maybe they're going to have to make sure that they take care of business against teams that they're supposed to win when they're a 10-point home favorite, even though they haven't beaten this team in 5 or 6 years. So I think that's what it is. That's probably why I stopped at 5-0. I guess they must have had it must be a 5. And here, if you look at it, they've beaten them by 89 combined points. That's 17 points per game, including 38-14 last year. All right. Now let's talk about USC and Oregon State, that Pac-12 game that I won't be able to see. Maybe there'll be like a Pac-12 free, like 1 week free subscription app or something I can get for a week. I can't imagine I'll be watching too many of those anyway. But this is a really good game for the Pac-12. And remember, of course, when we did our Pac-12 preview, we were talking about what our predictions were. Well, these are two teams that could end up possibly, now the way Oregon State's going, but we'll find out in this game, of course, now that it's Pac-12 games. Well, these two teams could face each other in the Pac-12 championship game, because let's just remind everybody, there's no divisions in the Pac-12. There's no North beats and plays the South. They've opened it all up, so it's going to be the two best teams in the Pac-12 are going to play each other for the championship game, so anything's going to be possible. But yes, of course, I think that if you had to pick a game or two that you knew Greg was going to pick, you knew this was going to be one of them. You know what I think about Jonathan Smith and Oregon State at home, especially that they're a dog. Even though even though I had a big play with USC at Stanford a couple of weeks ago, so I know how good USC is. I know how good Coach Riley is. I know how explosive this offense is. But this is Oregon State at home. They've won and covered 6 straight at home versus FBS teams. They upset USC last year on the road as a 10-point dog. That snapped a 23-game losing skid at USC. This is just, in my opinion, an undervalued Oregon State team. Actually, if you look at it, Oregon State has not been favored yet against FBS teams.
That's a good point.
That's crazy.
Yes, that's a real good point.
They're just not. They were not. I think that game went pick'em, the Boise State game. So they're not even respected yet, and I think that's a good thing for me. That's why I'm going to go ahead and ride them one more time. And I think I took the points in this one. I did not go with the money line, but the money line is also something that I would definitely look at because you're getting 2-1. Let's see. No, I did take the money line. So I went ahead and rolled the dice. I took Oregon State 2-1 on the money line.
This is what you call a big step-up game for a football program that hasn't been this far before. My old Conway Twitty song that I love to use as analogies of, you've never been this far before. Now they're going to take on a Southern Cal football team here that everybody's got to win, expected to win the Pac-12 championship, and who's dominated this program in the past. You take a look, obviously, revenge for Oregon State, which there's been a lot of in this series. And Oregon State has not been able to handle revenge, 1-10 to the spread when they're at home seeking revenge. But again, a lot of those are old Oregon State numbers here. Jonathan Smith has done a great job with this football program here. He's one of my coaches that you have to really endear yourself to, because this football team has improved leaps and bounds over the course of his tenure since he's been here. I just don't want to step in front of Southern Cal right now. Lincoln Riley's building something over there. And will it happen here this week where he gets derailed? Quite possibly. But I don't want to be there until it happens. So I'm kind of out of the school of until they trip up, I'm not going to be there to call the week that they do get tripped up. So put me down for a pass in this football game.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, for me, if it wasn't for the fact that I have been riding this Oregon State team, especially when they're dogs, especially when they're home, I'm just going to keep riding them until I lose one. Next week, Oregon State goes to Utah. So you talk about waking up real fast as far as we're going to find out how good this team is. We're going to find out because if they lose two in a row, then they're going to be out of it as far as the Pac-12 race. USC, meanwhile, they have 2 home games, and then they go to Utah.
Who does Oregon State play after Utah, Greg?
After Utah, Oregon State. let's see. They're going to be playing Stanford on the road.
Now that's a real letdown spot right there. Okay, coming off these two monster games like this,
Especially if they beat Utah. Like if
it,
they lose to USC and they beat
and
Utah.
they come back and beat Utah, then they're feeling awfully good about themselves.
Yeah.
God forbid if they sweep both of these football
Oh,
teams.
yeah, right.
But we'll talk about that when that game comes
I
up.
certainly hope that
Yes.
happens because I'll cash up big time if that happens. Okay. And then one other game I wanted to talk about before we get to the double-digit upsets, and then we'll talk NFL. James Madison and App State. Wanted to talk about this a couple of reasons. First, obviously, to bring up the Hail Mary, which was incredible. And then we talked about this and mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, that James Madison is for real. And all you had to do is take a look at what they've done so far. And we previewed this conference and went over the incredible toughness of the East Division. I mean, now people can kind of look and see what we were talking about. Georgia Southern beat Nebraska. Old Dominion beat Virginia Tech. Georgia State could have been. I think what are they? 0-2. They could be 2-0, and had a really tough first game. I think what was it at South Carolina? I think.
I believe so.
We know how good Coastal Carolina is. They have a first-round quarterback. Marshall upset Notre Dame, and App State upset Texas A&M. I mean, that's one division in the Sun Belt. But James Madison hasn't really had their moment yet. And I think they're going to have their moment on Saturday because this is a for real program and they've got a lot to prove. And I just think, I think you've got a very interesting dynamic here. You have an App State team that has had close game after mentally stressful game after mentally stressful close game piled on top of another and no breaks. And here you got James Madison. Who'd they play last week?
What we call a high school, okay?
No, actually, easier than that. They played the bye.
Well,
The bye school.
the last game they did play though. I mean,
they played a weak team.
Yeah.
And then they played a bye. So they have nothing, no kind of mental stress, or they are just, and they have been waiting and sitting for the past week, 2 weeks, waiting for this game. And I think it's a great opportunity to go ahead and take James Madison in the seventh.
This is probably as good of a scheduling spot as there is in the college football card this week. As you mentioned, all these tough games that Appalachian State's come off of, their games have been decided by 2, 3, and 4 points this year. And you're talking also about this Madison wanting this game to assert themselves as being a legitimate FBS team. They dominated in the FCS, James Madison did, when they got the invite to come over here. And they gladly accepted it. Won a few championships, if you will. And you got Appalachian State not only in this letdown role, but they've also struggled the last 9 times that they've been favorites of less than 10 points, just 1-8 to the spread. It all fits nicely wrapped up package to fade Appalachian State, feeling awfully good about themselves, and especially off that Hail Mary win. I think the Dukes could upset Appalachian State here as well.
Yeah, App State also has dropped 6 straight covers as a favorite versus the opposition when they have a greater than 600 winning percentage. Okay. Now, the 3 upsets, double-digit upsets that are on my book this week, out of the 3, which one do you like the most?
You want to share with your listeners who are those?
Oh, sure. I have Stanford over Washington. They're a little over 4-1. South Florida is over 4-1 over Louisville. And Tulsa is 10-1 over Ole Miss.
It's got to be South Florida for me. This is a football team we talked about early on in the football season. I know you like them. I like them. They come back with a ton of returning experience. They've shown they can play. They've shown they can pull upsets. And I think they get the right football team here in Louisville, who just gagged their way to a loss their last football game they played against Florida State in that Friday affair. This is a nice spot for South Florida to go in here and pull the rug out on the Cardinals.
Yeah, Cunningham is another quarterback that's kind of been disappointing. He's a great athlete. He can throw better than Richardson, I will say that, but not my bunch. It's still a very one-dimensional kind of quarterback, and that helps him when they, no big deal when they play weaker teams, when they have to step up a competition. That kind of puts them in a bad spot, but maybe it is a letdown spot. They're getting 15 South Florida. So, but again, I figured I'll go with the upset there. By the way, the reason I went with Tulsa, and I don't take this lightly, going against an SEC team at home, but if you look at Tulsa, they're 16-1 against the spread. Their last 17 on the road when they take on teams with winning percentages of 600 or better. They're 10-1 against the spread the last 3 years as a road dog. They've covered 12 straight as dogs of 2 or more points following back-to-back straight-up wins. So I'm just going all out. They've got this Bryn quarterback who's off to a fantastic start. So they have a quarterback that's really showing that he could do something. And let's keep in mind, Ole Miss is still a work in progress. They haven't played anybody yet. Bunch of transfers that have come over to try to help. This was going to be a rebuilding year for Kiffin. Still may be a good team, but I'm not even sure what they have a quarterback yet. They got the Jackson Dart kid from the USC.
Yes, right.
Who's a nice talent. But, again, they haven't played anybody, and I think Tulsa is going to be the best team that they've played.
You've also got Ole Miss looking ahead to Kentucky next week in a homecoming game for the Rebels. So could be a real nice letdown look ahead spot here in fading the Rebels in a game like this. And as you mentioned, Tulsa does have a lot of credential, especially when taking out onto the road against some quality opposition. I'm with you. I think they get the spread in this game. Now, I don't know if I'm going to
22. Yeah.
I don't know if I'll be as bold as you on a money line. Okay. But I like them plus the points.
And then the final game was Stanford, and that line that keeps rising. And I know why. Part of it has to do with the fact that Emmitt Smith's son, the running back who's done everything for them for the Cardinals, is out. But if you look at this, Stanford, they've turned the ball over 4 times in each of their games. They had a bye last week. So obviously, if you're going to pull off an upset, you can't turn over the football this week. But they have, against Washington, they're 6-3 straight up in the last 9, and have upset Washington in 3 of the last 5 years, including 2 on the road. Throw in the fact that in the last 5 years, Stanford has had at least 1 Pac-12 upset, and I'm not talking 2 or 3 points, and they have 7 Pac-12 upsets in all in the last 5 years, 4 on the road. So, and remember, they upset Oregon last year. Oregon's only loss was to Stanford, and that kind of ruined the rest of their opportunity to be a playoff team. So what I'm trying to say is I don't believe in Stanford, but they have a good quarterback, and they just always seem to come up with upsets out of nowhere, at least once a season in the Pac-12. So I figured, hey, and you know what the other thing? 4th straight home game for Washington. So.
Well, you might call it a letdown spot, but probably not because it is a Pac-12 football game. But I'm going to say this, that Kalen DeBoer, the head coach from Washington, is probably the best college football head coach that nobody knows.
Sure.
I mean, his credentials are off the charts.
Yeah.
67-3 when he won 3 NAIA championships.
Yeah.
My goodness. The man can coach.
And did a great job bringing in Penix.
Yes, he sure did. And what a shot in the arm that was. I mean, this kid has the potential to be an MVP inside the Pac-12 this year.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. He should be if he wins. If he needs that game that everybody's watching. Unfortunately, not a lot of people cared about Michigan State, even though that was a really big win. And but schedule-wise, they're not going to play a game that everybody's going to tune into until November 12th. And I only say that because if he had a little bit of momentum early on in the season, he could be an outside Heisman candidate.
He could be, exactly right, especially if they keep rolling. They keep rolling, they keep winning, they're undefeated. His name's going to come up in the talk because he'll be a large part of the reason they're winning. The other side of the coin, you got a Stanford football team that was supposed to be improved this year from an experience standpoint, but you still have to acknowledge the fact that this football team is struggling in conference games of late. They're only 7-18 to the spread the last 25 Pac-12 games, 0-7 straight up and against the spread their last 7 Pac-12 conference games. I don't want to jump in front of Washington because I think there's a monster in the making here.
All right, so that should wrap it up now for our college football, at least for now. What we're going to do is, as I mentioned before, at the top of the show, is we're going to just take a quick TO. We're going to have our NFL picks coming up, and I have a recorded outline of all the rest of the games that we didn't have time to cover here. So again, that's going to include key injury updates, some more trends, picks, odds, and all that stuff. So that's coming up for Week 4 in college football. We're going to do that right now and be back in a jiffy. Well, thanks, Greg. This is the report that we are going to implement inside our weekly shows for college football only. And of course, it's Week 4. And yours truly, along with Marc Lawrence, just finished with all of our college football analysis, picks, trends, and so forth. We did not have enough time for all of the information that I was able to put together. And again, thanks mostly to this magazine here, Playbook Magazine. Now, the Playbook Magazine is still available at playbooksports.com. Not just the Playbook Sports Magazine, but you also have the weekly newsletter that comes out. That's just a can't miss. Check it out at playbooksports.com. And the combination of the newsletter and the football guide really, and this is what does it for me, to tell you the truth. I mean, the newsletter is awesome because it basically updates you on what's going on during the season and includes more data, more trends that are not in the guide. I mean, there's only so much information you can even put in the guide because there's one page. What is it? Two. Well, for college, you have in the NFL, there's 2 per team. College is only 1 page per team because how many, you got over 130 teams. So there's only so much information that you can put in for every team. And there's a specific format and so forth. So the information that is not available in the guide gets spit out from the computer. Marc talks about it on his shows and, of course, puts it into the newsletter on a weekly basis. He also puts some of it in his daily emails that you can order. Check those out. All these valuable tools that'll get you ready each week for the NFL and college football. So again, there's so much information. I mean, look at I look at all this paperwork that I write down, all the information. I have just so much of it, and I just can't get it all done with Marc. So that's what these reports are for. And what I'm going to do during the reports is post up. Now, I'm just going to quickly update you each week on where we stand. So there's our record, 39, 25, and 3. We're over $3,000, almost $4,000 in just 3 weeks. A lot of that has to do with week 2 because of the long shots that came through for us on the money line. And there's our formula. 5 stars, $300. 4 stars are 2, 3 stars are 1. Every upset play, strict money line play, is for 100, and the additional picks are for 50. Moving along, these are our top picks. So you have our week 4 top picks in college football. We've got the 5 stars, the 4 stars, the 3 stars, and the records for each of them. Then in the upset specials, you see that, and the double digit specials, you see those. And then we also have our additional picks. So a lot of them here. I don't know. It's probably like about 20 additional picks here. These are the ones that are worth $50 each. So you can check them all out right here. And what's great about having the ability to watch these on YouTube, all you have to do is pause them. I could post this for 2 seconds, 1 second. You can pause it and you can check them all out. So that gives you an opportunity to do that for each of them. So again, these are our top picks. Those are our additional picks. And also, of course, our upset specials. Okay, so let's get through it. Thursday night, there's actually a game going on right now. I'm actually recording this on Thursday night, so I'm not going to be able to talk much about these Thursday night games. But we do have a couple of picks, so I'm posting them. I have no idea what went on in the games, but we are getting them posted on time just before these games. I'm not even sure if the games are into the first or second quarter yet. But we like West Virginia is actually one of our picks. Let me post that up right there. We have West Virginia -1, and we have Coastal Carolina -2. These are the games on Thursday night with West Virginia and Virginia Tech. It's basically, we just think West Virginia is a better team. And you got Big 12 against the ACC. I like what Virginia Tech's doing, though. I can see the momentum, but I think they're encountering a situation. They're a desperate team. Noah Brown wants to win badly. And I just think this is it's just a bad matchup, bad time in my mind for Virginia Tech. Excuse me, Neil Brown for Virginia Tech. So, um, but I don't like the fact that West Virginia is 0-6-1 against the spread in their last 7 as a road favorite. Um, Virginia Tech, though, 1-9 against the spread their last 10 following a straight up win. But I'm going to go ahead and take West Virginia minus the 1. I'm also going Coastal minus the 2. And we're doing that because uh, I know Coastal is not the team they were last year. They lost a lot of key talent. They haven't been as strong so far this year, but they still have Grayson McCall. I know Georgia State's desperate for a win, but keep in mind, Georgia State upset Coastal last year. I know that because I picked Georgia State as an upset last year. I did it because Grayson McCall did not play, and I was still getting good. I forget what the line was actually on that game last year, but it was a very good line, and we benefited. And that the line was in the close 13, and so we hit the money line on the double digit on that one, and that was a nice one. So it was probably like 4-5 to 1 on the money line. That I think means Coastal is definitely Grayson McCall's going. Oh, you can beat us without me on the field. Well, I'm on the field now, so I think that's going to come into play. The road team is also 5-0 in all 5 meetings in 5 years between these two teams. 5-0 straight up, 5-0 against the spread. And so, and again, that is the road team, which Coastal is in this one tonight. Okay. Again, that's that. These are some more of the top picks, but let's go ahead with some more of the additional picks. Syracuse -9 against Virginia. Keep in mind, Syracuse not on the road again until October 22nd when they take on Clemson. But look, Syracuse 3-0 against the spread. Virginia 0-2 against the spread. These are two teams gotten off to completely separate starts. Virginia, they got a new coach. I think they're going to be fine, but it's going to take them a while. Armstrong does not look like the same guy. He's got a different matter of fact. His coordinator is with Syracuse. And what a big difference, eh? So it's working out for Syracuse, not working out for Armstrong and Virginia. That's why we like Syracuse in that one. We like Boise State against UTEP as well. I think the line is a little bit too small. They were a 25-point favorite against UTEP last year, and they won 54-13. So why is it just 16 now? Just because they went on the road? I mean, what is it? You think Boise State's going to have it's going to be hostile territory? What are they going to have? 10,000 if they're lucky at the game? I mean, come on. Boise State minus 16. Now, and I'm staying with the chronological order of these games. So 12 o'clock, and I'm going to make my way all the way up to the late games. One of my 5-star picks, again, I'll just show up there quickly, is going to be Michigan over Maryland. So Michigan, given 17. I thought this line was too small when it began. I thought this was going to be more like about 25. So I jumped all over the 17. McCarthy making the start. He is definitely the man in charge now at Michigan. That, to me, is a big deal. Maryland's defense is not going to be able to contain Michigan. Maryland will score points. They'll do that. Michigan, first tough test for their defense. Kind of a new defense, new coordinator. Hutchinson's not there. Ajabo's not there. They're playing really well, but how good are they? Well, this is their first big test. I think they're 17 points better. That's for sure. They're at home. Maryland 4-11 in the last 15 ATS as a road dog. 2-15 against the spread in the last 17 versus conference opponents that have a 500 or better winning percentage. And for Michigan, they're 10-5 against the spread in their last 15 as a home favorite. They have beaten Maryland 6 straight up and against the spread the last 6 years by a 266-59 margin. So I'm taking Michigan favored by 17. I'm also going to go with the mild upset, Missouri against Auburn. This will go off about 12 o'clock on Saturday. Auburn, after what happened against Penn State, and we referenced this, Brian Harson's days in Auburn might be numbered. If they lose a game like this, now I don't know if they'll make a drastic change this early, but hey, you know what? Herm's gone, Frost is gone. I guess it could happen. And you know what? If it does, I want to make sure I take a little bit of money along with it. Missouri is, I think, a team that I'm not. I believe they're in a situation with Drinkwitz. They're looking for that big win. They're looking for, and I know Auburn's not playing well enough for it to be a major win, but it's a good stepping stone. It's still a quality win for Missouri winning at Auburn. And look, Auburn beat Missouri the last time these two teams faced each other, 51-14 back in 2017. So I just think Missouri, and I know I'm not talking revenge here, but I'm just trying to show you the point of these two teams, the difference in the programs. And I know it's a few years later, but I just think Missouri's overdue for one of these wins, and I'm going to go ahead and take Missouri to win this game outright. And they're 7 on the line, 220 on the money line. Also at 12 o'clock, Kansas and Duke. We talked a little bit about this game earlier. I like Kansas -7, so I mentioned that. Leipold is 23-9 against the spread as a home. Excuse me, at home versus FBS teams in his career. Okay, 23-9 against the spread at home versus FBS teams, and he's covered 8 straight as a favorite of more than 7. Right now, it's 7.5, I believe. Keep an eye on that. TCU and SMU. I'm going with TCU in this one. Why? Well, Dykes is on the TCU sideline now. SMU upsets TCU the last 2 times they played each other with Sonny Dykes coaching SMU. So and SMU was on the road on both of those games. TCU is now the road team with Sonny Dykes. I'm going to go ahead and take TCU. Quarterback Dugan's off to a nice start. They've covered 4 straight as a road favorite, including 1 this year at Colorado. I'm going to go ahead and take TCU -2. There's just more talent there. Moving on, another 12 o'clock game, Baylor, Iowa State. We're going with the Cyclones -2. Baylor 2-2 straight up, 4-0 against the spread. Their last 4 against Iowa State, all as dogs, just like Baylor's a dog in this one. Baylor won last year, so I think Iowa State's got a little payback here. Taking a look at it, Iowa State has covered the last 8 straight as a conference home favorite of less than 7. We talked about the quarterback. Purdy's no longer there, but the lefty's off to a nice start. They had the big road win at Iowa. They're trying to find themselves. They're a younger team, but these are we said this in the preseason show. These are the best Matt Campbell teams when they're not regarded so highly. Baylor, still a better talented team, but they still are also kind of finding their way. Shaping the quarterback, I haven't been very impressed with. I thought he was going to take the next step. I haven't seen it yet. South Florida, we talked about that. That's one of my upsets. Eastern Michigan's a game we're going with. Now the quarterback situation at Eastern Michigan, I'm gonna next week I'm gonna put up some of the information that we don't have listed up there as far as the injury, but it's a work in progress. We have a lot of things that we're working on to make this more of a complete show. But I'm going to be putting that up next week. So I'll outline all of the injury situations, all the key injury updates that you need to keep an eye on. And one of them, Eastern Michigan quarterback Taylor Powell. Now, he left the game in the second quarter at Arizona State last week. You wouldn't have realized it because they won the game. Austin Smith was the backup, so he played, didn't have big stats, but the running back, Samson Evans, went off. 36 carries, 258 yards, and a touchdown in the upset win at Arizona State. I have no idea why they're only a 6-point favorite. Just because Powell's hurt, I don't think that's a big deal. They won without him last week, basically. And Buffalo is 0-8 against the spread, and the last 8 is a road dog. This is not the Leipold Bulls. They're just not. I want to go back and reference that Auburn game, too, because there was a key injury in that one, and that is the quarterback, TJ Finley. Now, he is the starter, but he's not a very good quarterback. We've talked about that. They have major quarterback problems at all. Want to know why Brian Harsin is possibly looking for a new job? He doesn't have a quarterback. So Robbie Ashford's going to get the start with Finley out. Hey, you know what? Maybe this is what Ashford needs. Maybe this is what Auburn needs. If Ashford goes out there and has a really good game and shows that maybe I'm better than you think, then it could be exactly what Harsin and Auburn needs. But I'd rather them prove it to me. Okay, next up, let's talk about. I think we're going to go now to the 3:30 games. I took Western Kentucky in the game against FIU. A couple of reasons why, and I've hit with Western Kentucky a few times already this year. I hit him against Hawaii. I hit him against Indiana last week, and that Helton did a terrible job in that game. they were able to move. They had the lead for most of the second half. They get down to the inside the 10-yard line twice in the last 10 minutes, and both times he was way too conservative. They were This is a pass first team, but they were getting inside the 10-yard line and they're running the quarterback. So what are you doing? So they were settling for field goals. Like, oh, but if we do this, we just extend the lead, extend the game, we'll be fine. Well, of course that didn't work. Indiana marches down the field in like a minute, scores a touchdown, gets a 2-point conversion. They go to overtime. What does Western Kentucky do again? They get conservative, and it cost them to kick a field goal. And Indiana, what do they do? Of course, you know what they do. They score a touchdown, game over. But in this one, FIU head coach Mike McIntyre, 2-9 against the spread in his career with rest. They're coming off a bye. And that includes 0-6 against the spread as a dog with rest. FIU 0-10-1 in their last 11 against the spread versus Conference USA teams, and FIU was 3-10 against the spread in their last 13 as well. That's why we're taking Western Kentucky 31, and we don't like to take I have a thing that I work with myself. I don't go with a lot of the heavy favorites all too often. I have to have a reason, and I've got some good trends I'm going with. And again, I like Western Kentucky. I'm 2-0 with them. I'm going to stick with them. Plus, I have those trends against that are working for me. Well, not on Western Kentucky, but against FIU. And I also talk about how I very rarely take dogs that are more than 20, 25 points unless I think they have a shot to win. Again, I didn't say 100%, have one of those dogs in our slate that we'll get into. Okay, next up, Texas is one of our top picks, and they're a 6-point favorite. Ewers may play. Now, I hope he does because I have Texas, one of my top plays. But even if he doesn't, I do think Texas has turned the corner. They have not shown me and given me any reason to believe that they haven't. Talent's there; it's better. They seem to be a lot better coached. I've been impressed so far with what I've seen from Sarkisian. And I haven't been a big Sarkisian guy, but I've been impressed with so far. Robinson is running the hell out of the football, which is huge. And Texas Tech is still with their backup quarterback. Say what you want, he's done okay, but he's still a backup quarterback. And I only have to give 6 points in this contest. Texas has won the last 4 years against Texas Tech by 74 total points. That is, and that includes a 70-35. That's right, 70-35 win last year. 3-1, by the way, against the spread in those games. So that is very impressive, obviously, on the side of Texas, and that's why it's part of the reason that we're taking them against Texas Tech. Also, if you take a look at it, Texas is not only winning 2 out of their 3 so far, but they've covered all 3 of their games, almost beat Alabama, as we know. And like I said, maybe that Ewers comes back. That would be an icing. Okay, North Carolina, Notre Dame. I mentioned that on the show. We're taking North Carolina. They're 7-3 against the spread. Their last 10 as a home favorite. Indiana. I spoke about Indiana in the Western Kentucky game, and I have kind of hit hard on Indiana this year. I've said I think going into this week's game, I think Indiana and Rutgers are phony 3-0s. And I'm a Rutgers fan. Part of it for Indiana is the fact that they were very fortunate to beat Illinois in week 1. Probably should have lost that game. And then came back and should have lost against Western Kentucky. Okay, but saying all that, they're a 17-point dog now. See, I was looking at like the Western Kentucky game, which is why I took them, Western Kentucky, as I'm getting points here. But now I'm looking, okay, even though I don't like Indiana at 3-0. Hey, they're 3-0. The quarterback has done a nice job. He's elevated. The former Missouri quarterback has elevated the passing game. They were terrible the last couple of years with Penix out. So I like that. Shows that they could score a little bit if they need to. They've shown some moxie, winning close games, and they've got a little bit of revenge. Look, they're the Big Ten team, having to try to beat a team from the AAC who beat them last year by 14 points. So there's a little bit of payback there. I'm not saying they have to win the game. I'm not picking them as an upset. And look, I completely understand. As I've said, I've kind of ripped Indiana a little bit. But I'm going to give them some respect here and say that they can cover 17. And maybe I'll say, well, why are you taking, maybe they'll get blown out. And I'm like, you should listen to yourself. But again, I'm getting the points here. That's different. Just like Rutgers. I'm not playing Rutgers this week. They embarrassed me last week because I had them as a 3-star. One of my few losses, actually, is my top picks. I thought that there was a little bit more going there at quarterback. But I got to stay away from that Rutgers Iowa game. It's just the offenses of those two teams. That's just the over under is like 35 or 6. It's embarrassingly small. And I think Rutgers has a really good defense this year, and they're very well coached. But the offense is the quarterback is really big deal. And you know what? I'm going to root for him, and I'm going to hope that he turns his opportunity. Again, you got when you're a young kid, college quarterback, and you get these opportunities, you have to take advantage of it. Now, I don't know, maybe Noah Vedral somehow mysteriously plays, and I will say this: if Noah Vedral plays against Iowa, and here's the thing, they play Ohio State next week. Noah Vedral, I don't want to see him next week, because if he plays next week, then he could have played this week. There's no reason to play him next week. You're not beating Ohio State. So if you don't play this week, then you better just skip a couple of weeks. So if he plays, though, the point is, if he plays against Iowa, I would roll the dice on Rutgers on the money line, a little over 2-1, because they can beat Iowa if Noah Vedral plays. Can't believe I'm saying that. Toledo and San Diego State, we're taking Toledo in this one. They're a 3-point favorite. DeQuan Finn, he's a nice little dual threat quarterback for Toledo. So he's going to have a nice season and a nice career for the Rockets and the MAC. But San Diego State has all sorts of problems. This is another program that is going to be looking for a new head coach next season. Brady Hoke is going to be on his way out. Toledo 6-2 against the spread. Unless it is a road favorite. We're going to take Toledo -3 in that one. Minnesota, we're taking Minnesota against Michigan State. We saw the Gopher on our screen there. They're a 2-point favorite. I really like Minnesota in this one. Part of the reason is Michigan State dealing with a lot of injuries. We have some injury notes here. Jaden Reed, their top wide receiver, has a back. I think it's a back injury. Did not play against Washington last week. There were signs he was going to play. A lot of people thought he was going to play. I thought he was going to play. That's why I picked Michigan State. Didn't play. Safety Xavier Henderson missed the last 2 games with a leg injury. Defensive tackle Jacob Slade missed the game last week as well against Washington. And Darius Snow, starting linebacker, was injured week 1. He's missing the rest of the season. So there's a lot of key injuries for Michigan State. And Minnesota does have one of their own. Chris Autman-Bell. What a big injury that is at wide receiver. He is their top wide receiver, and he's out. He injured his leg last week. He's out for the rest of the season, and that's just unfortunate. But Minnesota, a couple other receivers that I think will be good enough to beat Michigan State. Abraham, the running back, is a nice player. I just keep my fingers crossed he stays healthy. But they've got a really good running back. They're very well coached. So I've got the coaching edge. I've got the running back edge. I think they're a healthier team. And I just think they're a better team than Michigan State, which is why I like them a lot at -2. And PJ Flack as a road favorite, 5-2-2 against the spread. Let's see. We are also taking Middle Tennessee against Miami. You're probably wondering why. Part of the reason is Miami's got some wide receiver injury news. Last week, it killed me against Texas A&M, but Xavier Restrepo, their top wide receiver, did not play. He's missed now the last 2 games, and he did not play last week. He's out officially now for. Excuse me. He hasn't missed the last 2 games. He missed just last week, and I mentioned this earlier on the show. I think I mentioned this on the show. What happened to him? I mean, here's a guy that. I mean, this is why injury reports is so hard. I don't want to come out here with the injury reports and you think this is like NFL injury reports or not. This is a lot of homework to try and find these reports to make sure that, and then you got to talk to people. So it's not easy. And even when you got what you think is a good report, you're going to get these things that are going to slip through because you don't have to disclose this stuff. So Restrepo did not play. If I thought Restrepo, their number 1 receiver, wasn't going to play, I wouldn't have taken Miami like I did, especially knowing that the quarterback was going to take over. The experienced one was going to take over for the kid. I wouldn't have taken him, but look, I knew for the game with the quarterback situation. But I didn't know that when we made the pick. And I also didn't know, of course, at all until game time that Restrepo wasn't going to play. But he's the number one receiver. He didn't play. Now we're hearing he's out for 6 weeks, I believe, with a foot injury. Their receiving core had 7 drops, Miami, last week. So Van Dyke, it was not his fault. The receiving core was terrible. On top of that, Miami 1-7 against the spread. Their last 8 as a home favorite, and 0-11 against the spread in their last 11 as a favorite by 3 or more when they score less than 14 points. So we're taking the Raiders plus the 27. We told you we're taking Tulsa. We gave you the trends on that one. By the way, the George O'Leary Bowl is taking place between Georgia Tech and Central Florida. Central Florida is a 20-point favorite in that one. I would have gone with Central Florida because I get a feeling Georgia Tech. Now, I think they should be patient with Collins. I really do, but I got a feeling I don't know if they're going to. I think they expected them to be on their way, showing improvement this year, and they may not be wrong because I thought this was a really good hire. I really did. But I'm disappointed in what I've seen from Jeff Collins so far at Georgia Tech, and they might be in the midst of just getting blown out every week. So this is a game that maybe they turn it around. I don't know. But UCF just 2-8 against the spread. Their last 10 as a home favorite, which is part of the reason why I just said, you know what, we'll skip that one. Oregon, Washington State. We're taking Washington State, not as a big play, but we're taking them because they've done a good job for us. They helped us out with Wisconsin. They were one of our 5-star picks last week against Colorado State. Oregon had the big win against BYU. But again, keep in mind, I think really looking at the game, I believe BYU was so physically beat up by that Baylor game. Overtime, those were 2 teams that were just hammering away, a lot of running. The 2 top receivers for BYU were out. They still may be out this week. Get to them in a little bit. But that's, I think, part of the reason Oregon was able to do what they did. Still, a very impressive win for Oregon and landing after what happened with Georgia. So we know a little bit better now what's going on with Oregon. But I need to see another win by more than a score against an undefeated team on the road before I go, hey, look out for Oregon. It could be interesting. They have beaten Washington State the last 3 years and covered 2 of the last 3. There are a lot of trends that are citing actually towards Oregon. But like I said, I am going. Because look, one of them is Oregon's won 11 out of the last 15. They've covered 9 straight as a road favorite of less than 10 versus winning teams. But I've got my this season Washington State deal, and Washington State has covered 4 of the last 15. Washington State has covered 11 of the last 15 against Oregon. Arizona, we're taking Arizona against Cal. This is another one of those situations we talked about. Arizona has beaten Cal 6 straight times, but Cal is the 3-point favorite, taking Arizona plus the 3. We're staying away from East Carolina Navy because Navy's off to a terrible start. They're coming off a bye. They got Air Force next week. But coming off the bye, maybe they fix things, which is why, I'm surprised. I don't know what's going on in Navy. All I know is that if they don't have a good season this season, it might be time to start thinking about another coach because if you look at it's one of those things where it's like, okay, so you can only win when you have a really good quarterback. That's kind of what's going on in Navy, as far as I can see. When they don't have a good quarterback, when they have one of those electric type of guys, they're just a very average to below average team. And they haven't had a good quarterback in several years, and they haven't been very good for several years. But Navy's got a lot of good trends in this one. 5-1 straight up, 6-0 against the spread. Their last 6 against East Carolina. 18-4 against the spread. Their last 22 after they allow 35 or more points. East Carolina, by the way, snapped the 5-game losing streak, beating Navy last year. We know they're a much better team than Navy, but it's a lot of points, 16.5, which is why we're staying away. We decided to stay away at the last second with Georgia Southern as a 9-point favorite against Ball State. But we were this close to taking them. 8-2 against the spread, their last 10 as a home favorite, and they've covered 6 straight at home versus non-conference. Actually, they're 6-0 all time against the spread at home versus non-conference FBS. Actually, non-conference teams since they've become an FBS. We're going with Old Dominion against Arkansas State. That's one of our plays. And it shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, you know what we feel about Old Dominion. picked them as an upset play week 1. Like the coaching staff. They've actually, once again, they're having a nice season. They've played tough against better teams. Now they're the better team. I think they'll take. We're going with Rice getting 18 against Houston. Houston is 129th in the nation in penalties. That's terrible. They're coming off the blowout loss, kind of a blowout loss to Kansas. They had the receivers fighting on the sidelines last week. So you got the players are fighting. There's penalties. That's not a good sign. Dall, their star receivers, injured. If you take a look at it, shoulder injury against Kansas. So he may not play in this game. And he's the weapon for Houston. And I just think, you got a Rice and Houston, a very close proximity campuses. Houston is obviously dominated, including last year. But look at Houston. First 3 games, 2 overtimes, and then a big Kansas, a high offensive game. So this could be a letdown. And I think Rice coming off the upset win. It was a very impressive win against Lafayette. You know what I think about Bloomgren and Rice? I've been saying one of these years they're going to turn the corner. Finally, they found themselves a quarterback in his kid McMahon. This would be the game. That's why I'm sticking my neck out here. Going, not that it's like a major pick, but it's like, okay, show me that you have turned the corner. If you can maintain, a 10-point loss, a 14-point loss, a 7-point loss against a Houston team, I think that's going to tell me maybe you have turned the program around, or you're on the way of doing that. I'm willing to roll the dice a little bit this week. Also, Arkansas, Texas A&M, we talked about that one. That's going to be as we start heading into the night games. We're taking Liberty against Akron. They've covered 7 straight as a double-digit home favorite. We jumped on them, as you know, early this season, and then they went ahead and nearly upset Wake Forest last week. So, look, how many times have we seen it? How many times have we seen it in all sports? You have a quarterback that gets hurt for Liberty. Young backup comes in, and he's taken over. And thank goodness the young backups come in because he's done a fantastic job. Stole that job. Okay, we're also going with UNLV. You know what we think about the job Arroyo is doing at UNLV. They're a 2-point favorite on the road. That's the tricky part. Okay, get this. It's the first road favorite spot for UNLV since 2018. In the last 6 games that they have been a road favorite, they have not covered any of them. They are 0-11-1 in their last 12 as a road favorite of more than 1. These are all bad signs. Utah State has beaten UNLV 6 straight times, okay? And you say, yeah, but they're a favorite. Remember what you said? Yeah, but 2 is almost like, and I wouldn't be surprised it's gotten off to like pick them. So this is not a major favorite. Anything under 3 is almost pick them. But Utah State has lost their last 2 games by a 90-7 combination, and they're 1-6 in their last 7 as a home dog. They are right now, and I think as much as we respect the job Anderson's done, no question about it. They had 6 upsets last year. Nobody expected Utah State to have the season they had. Nobody. I mean, I jumped on their bandwagon late. Not sure how many people were with us last year, but I jumped on their bandwagon late. Cashed in nicely in their last 2 or 3 games. It was great. But they lost a lot of talent this year. Still have their quarterback, but lost a lot of talent. And I just think it's catching up to them. They just don't have the talent. They surprised everybody last year by doing things they probably shouldn't have done. I think it's catching up to them. But for me, I'm sticking my neck out at UNLV because I've talked them up, and this is the type of game that's going to prove to me whether or not they've turned the corner. You got to win a road game in this spot. You basically got to win a road game that you're supposed to win. That's basically what they haven't been able to do for years. That's what those trends mean. So I'm willing to say, you know what? I'm sticking my neck out that, yeah, they are better. And I think that this is the perfect spot to get that done. But we'll see. I'm also taking Southern Miss against Tulane. And how can you not love with the job Tulane, Willie Fritz? Really bad year last year, though. Very disappointing. Love the fact. And I think this is going to be a very good year for Tulane. So I now that they beat Kansas State last week, they should have a strong season. But coming back from that win last week, so there's going to be a letdown. They're 1-6 against the spread their last 7, following an upset win. They creamed Southern Miss just 2 years ago, 66-24. A lot of players remember that game. Will Hall, the head coach at Southern Miss, was the offensive coordinator for Tulane, for Willie Fritz, so he knows what's going on there. So I think this is a good spot for Southern Miss. It's close, I really do. And Tulane with the letdown. But like I said, I think Tulane is going to have themselves a nice season. Marshall, 3-point favorite against Troy. We're going with Marshall. Troy 0-3 against the spread as a home dog last year. So we'll see if that continues. They just lost the Hail Mary game. That's got to hurt. But I just think this is about Marshall being a better. Vandy's getting 41 points, and we're taking them. Game I was talking about. So why am I doing it? Well, if you know, I've taken Vandy a few times this year. We've hit on 3 out of 4, I believe. The one we lost was the weight game. Look, the quarterbacks have done a good job for Vandy. And this kid Wright came out and played well for him. They've had another kid that just came out and played a really good game for him last week against Northern Illinois. I like the direction of the program. And here's the trend that helped me. Alabama 0-9 against the spread in their last 9 games when they've been favored by 38 or more following a double-digit straight-up win. Well, Alabama usually wins by double digits. So it's telling me that Alabama's had a hard time when they're a major favorite of 38 or more. And I like the fact that Vandy's playing the way that they are. So I'm going to go ahead and take Vandy in those points. Okay, let's see. I'm not taking FAU Purdue, but FAU 2-6 against the spread. There was 8 as a road dog. So that's the biggest trend there. Wisconsin, Ohio State, that line is up to 19 now. First time Wisconsin is a road dog since 2019 when they were at Ohio State. Ohio State has won 8 straight versus Wisconsin with 3 Big Ten titles in those within those 8 wins. And they've won and covered the last 5 at home, Wisconsin. Now, here we're going to go with a game that I was considering an upset, but I wasn't going to go that far. But I'm taking the points as a 3-star. Charlotte getting 23. Remember I said this last week with the Charlotte-Georgia State line game that the why I stood away from the game because I wasn't sure whether or not the quarterback, Reynolds, was going to play for Charlotte. Big difference, and that's why I stood away. But I did. Charlotte won the game because of Reynolds. He had a phenomenal football game. And I didn't like what I saw from South Carolina last week against Arkansas. I don't really like what's going on with Rattler. I just don't think he definitely hasn't turned a corner or regained his confidence all that much. And you're asking 23 points. It's not like South Carolina's an offensive juggernaut because they're not. So I think it's a good spot. Take 23. That's why I'm going ahead and doing that with Charlotte. I was tempted to go with the 11-1 money line, but I just figured Conference USA team winning at an SEC team, I wasn't going to go that far. Not to say I might not throw a buck on there, in a parlay with an NFL game, but not enough to put it picks for 100. We're taking ULL, which is Louisiana Lafayette, against ULM, which is Louisiana Monroe. And that's because the road team in the series has covered 12 straight times. And it's only 9. And I think this is a reflection on losing to Rice last week. But from my point of view, I think it's good for Rice. Apparently, Vegas thinks it's more of a Lafayette thing. We'll find out. But I'm taking. By the way, 4 of the last 5 in the series has been decided by 6 points or less. So that might have something to do with it as well. But I'm going to go ahead and go with the 12 straight as far as the road team covering. Kansas State, Oklahoma. I stayed away from this game. Kansas State let me down against Tulane. Doesn't mean I'm not going to throw a couple bucks on the money line myself because I did put Kansas State in the championship game this year. And I'm going to give Adrian Martinez a week. One more week to show me that something's going to wake up. Because you have a phenomenal. Deuce Vaughn is going to be a very good NFL player. You've got Knowles is an electrifying player as well. You've got exciting tools to work with, and the quarterback's not doing anything. The defense has played really well. But I'm definitely glued to this one because I want to see how for real Oklahoma. Nebraska, you can't tell, and you really can't tell with the teams they've played yet. But this is definitely a barometer game. It's a 12.5 point spread. The money line is almost 4-1. 4 of the last 5 meetings have been decided by 7 or less, with Kansas State winning 2 of those outright. They're 2-1 straight up, 3-0 against the spread their last 3 years against Oklahoma. Kansas State is, and Kansas State has covered. Oklahoma has covered 11 straight at home before they go on the road to play back-to-back road games. So that one sides Oklahoma. 3 of 6 Big 12 home losses by the Sooners have been to Kansas State, and that's been since 2012. So yeah, they seem to have Oklahoma's number, but it's a new coaching staff, and I'm definitely worried about what I've seen from Adrian Martinez. I stayed away from this one. We talked about USC and Oregon State, so I gave you some of the trends in that one. Here's another one I didn't mention. USC is 111 against the spread their last 12, following back-to-back straight-up wins. If the last win was a non-conference game, Oregon State's to play in that one for me. So, let's see. I'm not taking the Hawaii-New Mexico State game. I've learned my lesson years ago from grabbing these games. But New Mexico State is a 5-point favorite, and Hawaii is 10-0 lifetime against New Mexico State. BC, Florida State. I like Boston College in this one. The dog has won 4 straight outright in this series. So that sounds good for BC because I'm taking the 18, not the money line. Florida State has won the last 3 straight up and against the spread, though, against BC, all as dogs. They're also 10-1 against BC straight up in the last 11. So there's some conflicting ones there. But for me, I just think it's a lot of points for Florida State. I know everybody's given up on BC already because the offensive line hasn't been very good, but they still have a talented quarterback and wide receiver. So, FSU could have a letdown, and FSU's got injuries too. Taking a look at their injury situation, Jordan Travis, remember he injured his foot last week in the win against Louisville. So Rodemaker may have to start this week, and that's different from coming in relief. Now you got to start, and the opposition has film on you, and they can prepare for you. That's different. And also FSU has all sorts of injuries on the offensive and defensive lines, so that may eventually come back to haunt them. I'm going to go ahead and say at least it does with 18 points in the game on Saturday night. Remember I said I was going to get to BYU. Well, they're a 21.5-point favorite against Wyoming. They've won 8 straight against the Cowboys. But they're 1-6 against the spread their last 7 following games in which they've allowed 35 or more points. And as you know, I really love the job Craig Bohl has done at Wyoming. Here's a guy who did some great job. He had playmakers on his team, including Allen at quarterback, who is right now one of the most phenomenal quarterbacks in the NFL. And they've always been a run-first team until Allen came along. But they're still a run-first team. They've put a nice stretch together. They upset and came back from behind to win the game against Tulsa. They won from start to finish and beating a very good Air Force team. So he is just finding a way to do it. I think a lot of people thought this would be a big down year for Wyoming, and he's doing it. Matter of fact, Wyoming has won 3 straight games this season with 2 outright upsets. So I was just like Charlotte. I was like, should I 11-1 with the money line? I decided to go with. I think it's a 3-star. I decided to go there instead, getting the 22. And we still don't know if BYU's starting receiver. I'm taking San Jose State against Western Michigan. San Jose State has revenge in this one. Western Michigan beat them last year by 20, 23-3. That was ugly. You look at it, though, San Jose State has covered 8 straight as a home favorite when they are favored by less than 10 versus an opponent with a losing record following a double-digit straight-up loss. And the last 2 games, we said we're staying away from Arizona State, Utah. It's a 15-point spread. Arizona State close to a 5-1 dog. Utah has covered 10 straight games away versus the opposition with winning percentage of .850 or less, coming off a double-digit when Utah's coming off a double-digit straight-up win. And but if you look at it the other way, there were some good trends for Arizona State. They've covered 10 straight as home dogs of 4 or more, following a straight up loss, and 5-1 against the spread in the last 6 as a home dog. They're also 15-3-1 against the spread in their last 19 when playing with revenge versus an opponent of a straight up ATS win. So that and the coaching situation, I can't take that game. But the game I did take, Stanford and Washington, that was one of my upsets. I talked about that, and I gave the trends in the why, even though I do believe Washington is going to have a very good season, as we talked about. And just taking a look at the rest of the injury information that might have an effect on some of the games or not, just keep in mind Cincinnati is playing without 2 of their best players now this season. Center Jake Renfro's out for the season, and defensive end Malik Van. So both of them out for the year. And throw in the fact that they lost a lot of key players to graduation last year. And Cincinnati is starting to, play with some depth players now. Jake Haener had the big injury last week against USC. The schedule is nice because they play, I think it's UConn on the road. I think they might have like a bye in UConn, I believe. They have a bye, then UConn. They don't play Boise until the 8th of October, so that's 2 weeks. I think he'll be okay from what I hear by then. I can't imagine that, 2 weeks before that, you got the bye in UConn. Why would you play? But hopefully he'll be ready for Boise State. He's just too good of a player to want to see him on the bench. Miami of Ohio will be without their starting quarterback, it looks like, for the rest of the season now. Brett Gabbert, who had the injury week 1 against Kentucky. Nobody had an update on that, but now apparently it looks like he's out for the year. So that's unfortunate. Miami of Ohio. Talked about North Carolina, and I mentioned this, but their top 2 wide receivers, Josh Downs and Antoine Green, are both expected to return this week against Notre Dame. Downs played week 1. Green has not played all season. And yet the offense has still done fantastic. So now they get these 2 weapons back against Notre Dame, and that's part of the reason why I like them this week. Northern Illinois, they're going to be playing the game this week against where they're on the road. Forget who we just talked about. They're on the road. But anyway, Rocky Lombardi, their starting quarterback, injured his leg last week against Vanderbilt. And we still don't know if he's going to play this week when they take on Kentucky. Still don't know. Redshirt freshman Ethan Hampton would have to play. Looks like. I mean, he played in relief. Had a couple touchdowns in the game against Vanderbilt. But remember, this is a team that lost their star wide receiver Trayvon Rudolph before the season even began. Going out there with a backup quarterback again, you would have Kentucky preparing instead of not. That could be a big deal. But Rocky Lombardi hopefully will not be missed for more than a week, if that. Oregon State. Now, even though I've taken them this week, I'm not happy with the fact that they're going to be without Luke Musgrave, the tight end. He's so far he's gotten off to a really good start as one of the better tight ends statistically in college football so far this year. Big part of Oregon's offense, but he's not going to play, so that's a big loss. I'm not happy about that, but still going to roll with the Beavers. San Diego State. Now, remember, we're taking Toledo in that one. Braxton Burmeister injured his eye in the game against Utah, did not play the rest of the game. So they went to true freshman quarterback because they went to Will Haskell, a redshirt freshman. They played him for a series. Then they said, no, don't like what you didn't do out there for your series. Putting the true freshman Kyle Crum in. He played the rest of the game. Didn't play all that well, which quarterbacks at San Diego State do. Haskell decides to transfer after the game, so he's out. And we have no idea if the true freshman is going to play this week against Toledo, but it's quite possible that could be the case. Tennessee, Florida, Cedric Tillman, key injury to keep an eye on. He's without a doubt their major weapon, 1,000-yard receiver last year, and already off to a very good start. He has a lower body injury from what we hear, and it's possible he might miss this game. Possibly he won't. He'll be out there, but just something you might want to keep an eye on if you're wagering on Tennessee. Again, we talked about Ewers, the quarterback for Texas, and the possibility that he could return because many people thought that it was going to be a month and a half before he returned. Now there's talk that he could play as early as this week against Texas Tech. I got him. I got him without Ewers, but if he plays, I'm even that much confident. Texas over Texas Tech. And Troy against Marshall. Carlton Martial, I think it's Marshall, the star linebacker there, injured week 2, did not play against App State. Keep in mind, they almost beat App State without their best defender. But we don't know if he's going to play this week, Marshall. So, and App scored a lot of points, so it's not like they did well without him. But anyway, that'll wrap it up. I'm going to include the injury reports up there. I'm also going to do a much better job of putting up the trends and the odds as I'm talking, so you can check that out as well. Just a lot of stuff to prepare for and a lot of stuff to implement into these shows, and there's only so much time in a day for me to be able to do this on my own. So we're just trying to do the best we can. Keep in mind, you can, on the bottom of the screen, you can use the channel markers. So if for whatever reason you don't care what the hell I'm talking about, I just want to hear what you have to say. But Mark, I enjoy that banter. Don't care about you talking by yourself for a half hour. You'll be able to go down to the channel marker and just, okay, this is Greg's report. I'm fast forwarding all the way till these guys start talking again. I have the ability to do that. We'll have that marker available for you each week on the show. That'll wrap it up. We're now gonna go back to Greg and to Mark as they take a look at week number 3 in the NFL. We'll see you next week. All right, we're back. So let's talk NFL. Great job, Greg, by the way. That's your up and coming broadcaster. Keep an eye on you. Let's talk about the NFL. And the NFL week number 3, Cleveland is going to kick off the week tonight against Pittsburgh. They've got to get over what in a very short week what happened to them against my New York Jets. And I can tell you that was just really. It's really interesting when you're so used to losing as I am. And I take that opportunity. See, I don't have the NFL DirecTV package anymore. So the only way I can watch my Jet games is I have to have NFL Game Pass. And NFL Game Pass has the 30-minute condensed games. It's usually about 45 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes. And so what I do is between like 12 o'clock till about 5:30 on Sundays, I go dark and I do all of my college football stuff. I get all my information from Saturday's games, and I go over all my stuff, getting ready for next week already. So I'm sitting there going over my college football stuff, watching the Jet game. Even when I'm watching the games, I'm doing my college football stuff because I'm not going to sit there staring at the TVs for 7 hours watching all these games. So game's pretty much over. They give up the touchdown, and I got the game now here, and I see something's going on, and I look, and they get this touchdown pass. I go, oh, that was interesting. Where'd that come from? But they got to get an onside. Nobody gets an onside kick. So I'm not even excited as a Jet fan. I'm like, they can't get the onside kick anyway. It never happens. So I go back to doing my work. I didn't even look at it. I go back to and I see something going on. And I turned on and looked, and I go, you got to be kidding me. They got the ball back. So then I go, all right, now I got to pay attention. And it's just, and even until, of course, they scored the touchdown, you just couldn't believe it. I still felt, well, Cleveland's going to come down. They're going to score. And then they got the ball midfield. They're going to just get one pass. They're going to kick the field goal, and they're going to lose. And it was one of those surreal moments as a Jet fan, because it's like, did they just get the win that will finally turn this franchise around? Because I believed that they've got the right general manager. I believe that they have the right head coach. I believe that they have more talent than they've ever had before, but they can't win. And they need to win a football game to finally prove it to themselves that they can actually, because that's how it is with losing franchises. But we'll find out. I don't know. We'll find out on Sunday. I think they have to definitely either beat the Bengals or Pittsburgh to prove that. They can't go 1-3, because then that means nothing. That was just a freak incident, and they're just still a bad team, and I'm not even going to be. But for the Browns, they had that first win week 1. Hadn't done that in a long time. Now they're going to get week 2-0 first time in, I don't know, 50 years, whatever it was.
1993.
Yes, as a Browns fan would know.
Yes.
And I don't even know how that. You tell me how that feels on your end.
Well, it felt the inverse of how it felt on your end. Okay, it was like, what the heck just happened in a football game like that? I can't believe what I just saw. Absolutely unraveling at the seams by the Cleveland Browns at the game. It was all about the coaching. It was very poorly coached football game. And my whole adage about the Cleveland Browns, while Deshaun Watson is not playing with them, is just flat out simple. Don't let Jacoby Brissett win or lose a game for you, because you've got running backs galore that can manage the game. Just don't let him win or lose a game. And what did they do? They let him lose a game for them. And that's all coaching. That should never have happened in a situation like that. So will the Browns learn from something like that? I think they're stunned, and I think they're shell-shocked. And I think right now they're looking at questioning themselves about what they're doing. I don't like their chances in this game against Pittsburgh tonight.
Yeah, I like Pittsburgh too. I'm not going with the win, but what is this, 4 points?
Yes, it's down to 4 points as we're speaking. Now it's been fluctuating between 4 and 5.
I'm taking Pittsburgh in the points.
But what you've got is a double revenge scenario working back and forth here. You go back and look at the series, each of the last 2 years, they've each won 2 games apiece. So now the Browns go into this football game with double revenge from last year, but they're only 3-21 against the spread in games when they have double revenge. The Cleveland Browns do. I don't know what they're going to do to suddenly remedy or rectify what happened last week. Then the other side of the coin is you got Mitchell Trubisky coming in for Pittsburgh, really kind of on the hot seat here, because the fans in Pittsburgh are chanting for Kenny Pickett. And Trubisky's a local Cleveland kid. He played high school in Cleveland here, so he's going to have a lot of family and a lot of support in a game like this. I like the Steelers in this football game.
Yep. Let's see. Steelers swept them last year, and they were dogs in both games last year. 3-1, straight up 4-0 against the spread last 4. Now, the thing that's a big now, Clowney's out for Cleveland, and he was out second half of the Jet game.
Yes.
TJ Watt's also out.
Yes.
And we know that, and that is a big deal. And I've talked about that repeatedly. I think he's worth quarterback points. That's how important he is. Yeah, Cleveland 3-10 against the spread. Their last 13 is a home favorite. That's not good. And Kevin Stefanski is only 2-11 against the spread so far in division games as a coach. That's not good.
No.
So that's why, they're 160 on the money line. Speaking of the money line, I wanted to ask you about Andy, who's on your show each week, talked about the Carolina-New Orleans game. And I wasn't 100% sure I heard him correctly. I think I did. But he liked Carolina, and he goes, I like Carolina, so take the points, and I'm also going to go with the money line. The money line's only 130. So my question is, and we might have talked about this before, about how I won't ever take a money line. I'd rather take the odds than the money line, unless I'm getting at least around 150. Maybe 145 at the least. And the reason I'm saying that is because I don't think it's enough. I'd rather just take the 3 points or whatever it is, 3.5 points. So is that, I thought most people were like that. Maybe I'm wrong. And you know what? If I don't have a lot of money, then I can understand maybe going with the money line as well. You know what? I don't have a lot of money, so I'll roll the dice and take the money line instead of getting screwed up with the VIG. Is there an average to what people like to do with the money line in those circumstances?
Well, I understand where Andy was coming from, because he does like Carolina, and he's saying I like them well enough to bet them on the money line, meaning he expects them to win the football game. It's also a lot like, if you could draw a parallel to betting Major League Baseball, it's like playing a baseball underdog and you're getting plus 130. You got a 140 favorite the other side. You're going to play the dog. You're going to take plus 130. Nobody's going to back away from taking 130 in a baseball game on an underdog. And I don't think you should back away here in the National Football League as well. Plus 130 is nice in your pocket. And if you're going to do something like that, you would want to play your take them plus the points, and maybe play half of that on the money line as well.
Do both at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. And use it as like a bonus. Worst case scenario, if they win and don't cover, I mean, if they cover but don't win, then maybe you're still making out a little bit of money.
Exactly.
Because that's about what, if we use the 130 and the VIG as an example, that's like what, like and let's say we're using $100 or $10. That's, well, let's say $100. That's like a $50 difference, right? With the VIG and the money line, because you got usually $10 or $15 on the VIG.
Yeah, well, you got $10 in the VIG, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
And
so
then plus 30, so that's
right,
about a $45 difference, is what I'm saying.
right, or they would say 40 cents, right? Exactly.
Okay. By the way, who do you like in that game? Because I like Carolina in that game as well. I just, to me, it's a gut feeling. That's it. Because I can see what everybody else is seeing. That this Carolina doesn't look very good right now. But I just have a gut feeling that they're going to pull it out.
Well, it's a tough game for me from this standpoint, and I should never let this be the standpoint because you can't let what happened last week influence what you're going to be doing this week. I used Carolina for a pretty big play last week, and I come up short in the contest here, and I should not have come up short. I'm not crying spilt milk. I'm just saying they played a good enough football game that they should have won the contest, and they didn't. When you open up the game with two turnovers in your first two possessions and they each lead to scores for the other team, and then you shut the other team down completely until the late stages of the football game and you lose on the last possession field goal, that's a really, really tough loss. Now, can Carolina bounce back from something like that? I believe they can. They're defensively really solid, and I don't think Baker Mayfield's going to lead them to any kind of promised land. But you just know that Christian McCaffrey is going to be busting open here pretty soon. As long as he stays healthy, he's got to become more involved in their offense. Their offense needs a shot in the arm, and it could happen this week.
Yeah, the Saints, you could already tell. Look, I'm not a big Dennis Allen guy. I think he's a very good defensive coordinator, but I just not wowed. And I understand why they gave him the job. He earned it, and he deserves a year to see if he can, become a head coach again. But I already don't like what I'm seeing with the Saints, especially with Kamara, we don't even know if he's going to play this week. So
No, you
that
don't.
could be a big loss. That's a huge difference. And even if he plays, it's his ribs. So they're going to be targeting his ribs on
He'll,
Carolina.
he'll likely be wrapped up and have a flak jacket if he does, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. By the way, as far as that Jets Cincinnati game, we don't really need to talk about it, but just keep in mind on the channel, I did interview John Sheeran. So that is already available on the website, on the channel. And John is an analyst for the Cincinnati Bengals, writer, and he writes for cincyjungle.com. So he does a really good job. Check it out. I asked him questions about the offensive line and Joe Burrow and this Jet Bengals matchup. So you can check that out on the channel. Kansas City and Indianapolis. Now, I always have this trend, and I remember seeing it for the first time in the magazine. I think it was could have been a couple years ago, and so it always sits with me. That, hey, so I don't even, it's funny, not many trends do. I always have to kind of refresh and look back. But yeah, we always knew things about Zimmer or the Clapper, things of that nature. But Frank, this is one of the ones that I also always remember, and that is, like, if I know the Colts lose a game by double digits, well, I know with Frank Reich there, I know to take the Colts the next week. I don't even have to look for the trend. And sure enough, Frank Reich 8-2 straight up. 8-1-1 against the spread, coming off a double-digit ATS loss. Also 10-2 against the spread off a division straight up. 10-2 against the spread off a division game versus an opponent off a straight-up win. So the Chiefs are down to now 5.5 from 6.5, and the big boost also for the Colts. They get Shaq Leonard back. That is a major difference maker. He may not be a superstar because he's not playing for all the big teams, but Leonard is a superstar in Indianapolis for the Colts on defense. He's that much of a difference maker. He hasn't played yet. He's supposed to play in this one, which is huge. It's their home opener. I think that's important. And as good as Kansas City is, they still haven't gotten into it. They're just a fine-tuned machine because of Mahomes and Reed, but it's not like they're this dominating offense yet. They don't have a pure number one guy yet to run to or to throw to, but they're just so well oiled with Reed and Mahomes are able to win games on a weekly basis, but they're also susceptible. And I think this is one of those games where they're susceptible.
Well, we talked about this on our podcast with Victor, as you know, Greg. We talked about Last week in the National Football League was a little bit of an anomaly. There were like a half a dozen teams that were completely red-faced embarrassed in their football games. So you have to ask yourself, which of those teams was the most red-faced embarrassed in what happened last week? And the conclusion that we drew is it had to be the Indianapolis Colts, losing not only 24 to nothing, but losing 24 to nothing to Jacksonville. Okay. Now they're going to, as you mentioned, it's going to be their home opener. And all of a sudden, all the systems and the angles kick in, not just the trends, but the systems and the angles. One of them being backing home dogs that are off of a loss of 24 or more points, which is exactly what the Colts fell to. Backing home dogs that are off a shutout loss against quality opponents. That's exactly what the Colts are into in this game. People have to realize this, that you want to run with the Buffalo Bills all season long. You want to run with the Kansas City Chiefs all season long. They're going to be good football teams, and they're going to be in the playoffs. And one of them is likely going to make the Super Bowl out of the AFC. But they're not going to win and cover every football game. No, they're not. And right now, they've both gotten off to these superior starts here. This is a spot where the ugly, red-faced, embarrassed dog jumps up and bites the over bet favorite in a football game like this. I have to grab the points with the Colts.
Just remember when the Chiefs came off of their Super Bowl season in 2020, they had, remember this run? It was right around mid-season. They had a streak of like 7 straight wins without a cover.
Yes.
Which is incredible. And they only had one cover the rest of the season after week 6.
Because they played close call football games. All of a sudden they were winning, but they weren't blowing everybody out.
Yeah.
And so their offense was exposed a little bit in games like that. Their defense was mediocre. And it's going to happen here sooner than later, and this is a perfect time for it to happen in Indianapolis on Sunday.
Yeah, it just shows you, especially, and the lines are a little bit bigger because they're the Super Bowl team and everybody wants to pick them. So Same thing with Buffalo. They were a 6-point favorite in this game. And, I was close to taking Buffalo because, I believe in what they're doing. They're a Super Bowl team. We both have them in the Super Bowl when the season began. But I've picked Miami both games this year and had them big time last week. And I'm just not going to – I'm not going to go away from them because 6 points is a lot. I understand why it's 6. And Buffalo has owned this series. They've won 7 straight against Miami, and they're 4-1-2 against the spread in those 7. But they're coming off a Monday night. There's a few injury concerns in the secondary for Buffalo. Then you're going to take on this explosive Miami receiving offense all of a sudden. So there's a lot of question marks there. This is one of those games where I could see Buffalo winning and not covering as well. So that's why I stayed away from it.
Well, we know, Greg, this is a different Miami football team. We've lauded what the great job they did in the offseason here. And right now, what is Miami? 2-0 for the season. They started out with 2 wins, 2-0. A different Miami football team, no question about that. There's a great scheduling nuance inside this game that I think Buffalo gets exposed in about here. They've hit on all cylinders. They look really, really good in their coming out of the gate. But look at what they've done. They open up on a Thursday and they cream the Rams. Okay, then they played on a Monday. Okay, in total Tennessee. Now they're coming back on a Sunday. That's Thursday, Monday, Sunday. Those are 3 different days of the week in 3 successive weeks for teams in the National Football League, who those teams in the National Football League are so adjusted and used to playing on Sundays.
Yeah. Tendencies.
Right. It just doesn't sit right for the timing of football players like this. And I think it happens here this week to Buffalo. I think they're going to go down to Miami, and I think they're going to be struggling and be exposed. You've also got a little bit of a heat factor and humidity down here as well. Now, there's going to be a ton of Bills fans here. They travel in hordes. When it comes time to come to Miami, they want to get out of that winter weather. Well, it has not been winter. It's obviously been the summer there. But if it's late in the season, they want to get out of it. But they love coming and traveling to Miami. So there will be Bills fans in the stands. But right now, the city is really taken and wrapped their arms around this Miami Dolphin football team. I think they have the 2 best wide receiver tandem in the league. That's why Tua is being right now coming out of his shell and developing as a quarterback here. This game's got upset to me written all over it.
Okay. That would put Miami at 3-0, going to Cincinnati on a Thursday night.
There we go.
So that could be interesting. Okay. By the way, Buffalo's at Baltimore next week, so that'll be something. And everybody glued into that one. All right. Also, as far as some of the big games that we want to talk about, speaking of Baltimore, this actually is going to be my top pick of the week. And you have to, of course, love the fact, if you're a Raven fan, that they finally have like a true number one receiver. Marquise Brown's a nice receiver, but I don't think he's number one. Bateman's got number one qualities. And so they've got that going for him. And now Duvernay's been there for a few years, so he adds to the excitement and anytime he touches the ball, it can score kind of deal. But they were doing it without the running game. Nothing. No running game. Now it looks like J.K. Dobbins is back. He's practicing every day. That adds to a huge deal with their offense. Throw in the fact that Kyle Duggar, who was drafted for the specific reason of being like one of those hybrids that could cover guys like Lamar Jackson, is dealing with an injury and may not even play this week. That's bad. Even though I had New England as a 5-star last week, I mean, I without TJ Watt, I expected their offense to be a little bit better than that. I mean, their offense is not going well right now. I don't even know what they're doing with the whole Matt Patricia calling plays thing. Matt Jones looks like he's unsure of himself. So, I mean, I'm surprised I'm only given 2 in this one. So I'm taking Baltimore.
Well, Baltimore is one of those half dozen teams that were in the bizarre finishes in football games last week. And you have to wonder what their psyche is like and all about this week. I've just talked about the Colts being like that, but the Colts are a dog, and they're a healthy home dog. Now the Ravens are going out as road favorites, and will they be able to be up and be mentally ready for a football game like this? I do know that if there's one role that John Harbaugh has really struggled with in his career with the Ravens, it's bouncing back up off the mat after being upset as a favorite when he comes back as a favorite in the next game. He's been in that role 12 times in his career, and he's not covered the spread in any of those games.
Wow.
Yes. So, you want to roll the dice and say it's going to happen in this particular football game when I'm a little bit unconcerned about their psyche, how fragile they could be here. I'm going to stay at home with the safer Bill Belichick home underdog play in this football game and take the points.
Green Bay and Tampa Bay. Boy, speaking, Tampa Bay, we got a couple of wins. Let's just get out of here. That's how they must have felt in both of those games. Let's get the win and get out of here, because they've got all sorts of offensive line injuries, wide receivers coming in and out. Mike Evans is going to be suspended for 1 game. Godwin and Jones were out last week. They may not even play this week. The offensive line is a complete disaster. But hey, you know what? It's Tom Brady, and he always finds a way to win football games, and that's why they're 2-0 by a 39-13 margin. So it's been the defense that's really been doing it. But look, the Packers, they're a much more desperate team. They don't want to go 1-2. They didn't. Maybe there might be a little bit of a revenge factor in there, because Packers got blitzed in Week 5 in 2020 at Tampa Bay by 28 points. Same season, let's not forget, they lost the NFC Championship game at home to Tampa Bay. So, they might be up a little bit for this game. Anyway, I like the Packers in this one. I just think when you're that banged up like Tampa Bay is, and you win ugly the way that they have, and now you have to step up in competition, I think sooner or later they're going to get an L, and I think this is a good spot for it.
This is a kind of a game where when you like the underdog in the contest here, you would rather not there be the injuries, and you'd rather be the benefactor of a full array of points that you would expecting to get. The Green Bay Packers should have been at least 3-point underdogs in the contest. But Mike Evans is suspended. They've got injuries, all the good things like that. And suddenly the game is Tampa Bay 1 as we're speaking here right now. A little bit short on the points, yes, but looking at Tampa Bay, they're returning home off back-to-back road wins and covers in their first 2 football games. That is not a good situation for NFL football teams. I ran it through the database, and they really struggle at home in their home opener after winning and covering season-opening road games. So that plays against Tampa Bay. Their offense is struggling here right now. I think you got the much better quarterback for the here and now in Aaron Rodgers as opposed to Tom Brady. I'm not talking about all time in a career. I'm talking about in this particular football game here. I like Green Bay to win and cover this game.
And then Dallas and the Giants will be on Monday night. Daniel Jones, 0-8 against the spread on prime time. How about that?
Wow.
Taking on the Dallas Cowboys. The line went from 2.5 to 1. And here's one thing. The Giants are 2-6-1 against the spread. Their last 9 is a home favorite. I don't know. I wonder whether or not Dallas becomes the favorite by Monday night. I think that's a possibility. But here's another one of the things we talked about in college football. Dallas has won 9 of the last 10 against the Giants, and the Giants are the favorite. So I'm taking Dallas. I know Prescott's not playing, but I'm still taking Dallas.
You could have stopped right after you said, and the Giants are the favorite. That was all I needed to hear. They might not be, as you mentioned here. This game is going closer to pick as we're talking right now.
Yeah.
My only concern is backing Cooper Rush in his next game after the big performance that he had in that mop-up or that relief role last week here. That's going to be, we'll find out what he's all about here because it's that rally around the starting quarterback, get the win.
That works for a week.
Yes, right. Yeah. So we'll see whether or not Dallas flattens out over something like that. But you've still got a New York Giant football team that they're playing with double revenge in this game, just like the Browns are against Pittsburgh Thursday night as we're speaking here tonight. And just like the Cleveland Browns are, they're terrible with double revenge. They're 2-8 straight up into the number when they've got double revenge exact, the New York Giants. I just don't see the Giants winning again in a football game.
That's crazy.
Much more important to the Dallas Cowboys. In some way, somehow, I think the Dallas Cowboys find a way to win this game.
That's great. How the Giants have won the first 2 games is just, hey, take them when you're a struggling franchise. That's for sure.
For sure.
Just quickly rounding out the storylines, Lovie Smith, the former Chicago Bears head coach who took the Bears to the Super Bowl, will be returning to Chicago as head coach of the Houston Texans on Sunday. You have from Playbook, the Chargers are 16-2 against the spread in their last 18 versus AFC South teams. They're a 7-point favorite against Jacksonville. Herbert's banged up, but we expect him to play. Rams and Arizona, rematch of the wild card game last year. Rams won that wild card game 34-11. That one in Arizona. Rams right now a little bit more than a 3-point favorite on the road. And then you also have the Bill Belichick Assistant Bowl, Las Vegas and Tennessee. Josh McDaniels and Mike Vrabel in that matchup. Las Vegas is a 2-point road favorite. Detroit and Minnesota. Detroit has covered the last 3 versus Minnesota. It's interesting. The last 3 in the series between Detroit and Minnesota have been decided by 2 points in each of the last 3 games, which is part of the reason why I'm taking Detroit. So, by the way, Detroit has been a dog in 27 straight games. Again, thank you, Playbook, for that interesting stat. Next week, they host the Seattle Seahawks. I think that streak will come to an end.
Well, they were supposed to have been favored against Washington last week when the streak should have come to an end, but it ended up not going off that way. There was a lot of support for Washington in the end of the game. They went off the favorite, so the Detroit streak lives. We'll see how that continues next week when they host Seattle.
All right, Mark. So, again, you kicked us off talking about your new channel, Playbook Experts, on YouTube. And I guess you can leave us off with a little bit more about what's going on at Playbook, not only the YouTube channel, but, of course, playbooksports.com.
Yeah, we got a lot of good things up at playbooksports.com. This is the first week for our midweek alert statistical newsletter. And if you like statistics, you're going to love this newsletter. A lot of our fans like it, and they wait for that first issue. It's out right now. Our weekly newsletter, which we referred to, a lot of stats and trends we talk about inside that jam-packed newsletter, 18 pages. You can check it out all online at playbooksports.com.
Appreciate it as always, Mark. It's been another crazy week getting ready for football games that will kick off tonight, and then we'll do it all again next week.
Hey, Greg, I enjoyed it just as well. I look forward to catching up with you again next week. Let's hope the ball bounces our way this week.